Good evening. It's really great pleasure for me to be here. And I'm supposed to talk about my book, last book, Killing Order. It's one of the important, really, portion of Armenian genocide. The book is about denialism, how Turkish government denies the Armenian genocide. But I was told that actually there is a lack of knowledge on Armenian genocide, basically. So I thought maybe in first 5 minutes I do a 101 Armenian genocide so that you can follow my book or my presentation about the book. Armenian genocide, you have to keep maybe 4 important elements in mind. Usually when we speak about Armenian genocide, we talk about the mass extermination of Armenians between 1915 and 1918 during the First World War years. But actually, you should consider the genocide, Armenian genocide, as a process. It's always difficult to put the beginning and end of a process historically, but we usually take 1878 Berlin Congress. You might have heard about it. It's one of the really important congresses in European history. Berlin Congress, where the Armenian issue, Armenian question became a part of European or world diplomacy. This is like what is Israel-Palestine conflict today is. Armenian question was exactly the same in 19th century, and it started 1878, Berlin Congress, Article 61. Ottoman government promised European powers to implement certain reforms for the sake of Armenians, which they never implemented. So beginning 1878, after the process, the Armenian question was internationalized, there were a series of massacres in Ottoman Empire. 1894-96, approximately between 100,000, this is the conservative estimate, or 300,000 Armenians were massacred between 1894-1897, and there were another huge massacre in 1909 in a province which is called Adana in south of today's Turkey, and then, of course, the Armenian genocide 1915-1918. So it was a continuous process, persecution of Armenian people, and Armenian genocide was also not occurred in the vacuum. It was a part of overall mass extermination policy of Ottoman authorities. It was not only the Armenians that were persecuted by Ottoman government during that period. It was the Greeks, it was the Assyrians also. So mainly what we talk about, when we talk about Armenian genocide, we talk about the genocide against the Christian of Ottoman Empire. And Greeks were also targeted in several different phases, mainly, for example, I don't know whether you have heard Balkan Wars, 1912-13. During the Balkan Wars, an important number of Greek population from the Smyrna area were deported, expelled, or massacred in that area, and then it continued after the First World War also. And Assyrians were also massacred along with Armenians. So it was overall genocidal policies of Ottoman authorities. And what is the main reason? What was the main reason for this genocide? Usually we say that it is very difficult really to reduce or to give only one single reason. Genocide as a big mass extermination is always a combination of several different factors and results. One important factor is the Muslim-Turkish intolerance against Christians. What anti-Semitism was in Europe for Holocaust, Muslim intolerance towards Christian was the same. It was the cultural background of the Armenian genocide. Without really knowing, without this cultural background, without this Muslim attitude towards Christian, there couldn't have been any genocide. But it is not enough to explain the genocide. Anti-Semitism was stronger in France than in Germany, but the Holocaust occurred in Germany, not in France. So one important issue is the cultural background, the Muslim attitude towards Christians. Muslims in 19th century never wanted Christians to be equal as themselves. So they always looked them down, and the major Christian demand in 19th century was the equality. So-called Armenian question was nothing else but equality. Armenians were asking after the French Revolution equal rights as the Muslims, and this was never realized by Ottoman authorities. And another important reason for the Armenian genocide, what I call it the traumatic response of Ottoman authorities to the decline process of the Ottomans. What I mean is, I hope I can find this map. It's a wonderful map to understand the decline process of Ottoman Empire. As you see, this is the Ottoman Empire in 19th century, and beginning from the fringes, empire lost the territories almost every 10 years, every 20 years. Bosnia-Herzegovina, they lost beginning of 19th century, and then Bulgaria, Albania, and then Greece, and always empire was shrinking towards the center, and every 30, 40 years, they lost a huge amount of their territories. So it created a trauma by Ottoman rulers that their empire is going to collapse totally. So when Armenians started also asking reforms, Ottoman authorities considered these as a last straw on the camel. The Ottoman Empire will collapse totally. Why? Because all Christian nations within the Ottoman Empire, beginning from the Serbia, and then the Bulgaria, then Romania, then the Greece, they asked first reforms, equality, social reform, and Ottomans never realized these reforms, and this group then organized an uprising against Ottomans. Ottomans suppressed these brutally, and then great powers intervened. You all know the humanitarian intervention. The term was first introduced 1827 after the Ottoman suppress of Greek uprising. So the term humanitarian intervention came into international relations first in relation to Ottoman Empire's suppress of its own Christian population.
If you're going to walk around, you have to wear this.
Yeah? Okay.
The problem is it doesn't attach, so you have to hold it.
No, okay, no problem.
Let me make sure it's on.
It's
and
on.
so that we have it recorded.
So, the pattern is very simple. Christian minority group, Greeks, Serbs, or Bulgarians asking reforms, equality. Ottoman never realized this, accept this reform, suppressed brutally, massacres of the Christian population, great powers intervenes, and then on the table, Ottomans promise reforms, and as soon as the great powers withdraw from the Ottoman Empire, they continue again to suppress the Christian population, and another uprising, then great power intervention, and it ends with the independence of this group. Today's Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, none of them got their independence as a successful military operation. It was the result of great powers intervention. Each and every time, Ottomans were successful to suppress these uprisings, but the great power intervened, and then these states became independent. This is the reason why I'm calling Armenian genocide as a process. 1878, Armenians started asking reforms, and Ottomans feared. They thought, oh my God, it will repeat itself. What this Armenian is going to do would be the exact same what happened with Serbians, Romanians, Bulgarians, with Greeks. We should never allow it. So the second important reason for Armenian genocide was a reform agreement signed by Ottoman Empire and Russia 1914 February. Already before the First World War, Russia and Ottoman Empire agreed to create two independent, semi-independent provinces in today's Turkey's eastern provinces. So this was what we call it Armenian Reform Agreement. And it was exactly similar agreement Ottomans did with Serbs, with Bulgarians, and with others, which ended up with an independence of these states. So when Ottomans signed this agreement, 1914 February, with Russia, to establish two independent, semi-independent autonomous provinces within Ottoman Empire, they already knew that this is the beginning of a new Armenian state and they would never allow it. So this was major reason because they considered Armenians as a security threat to their national existence. This is the background. There are other reasons, but I skip all these. Then I can go back to our genocide map. When the First World War started, Ottomans already decided, this is important, to get rid of the Christians from Anatolia. Already before the First World War, they started implement a policy which we call it ethnic cleansing of Anatolia or homogenization of Anatolia. They started removing Christian population out of Anatolia, first the Greek to Greece, and when the war started, it was the turn of Armenians. So there is an important development during the war year. It was the military operation of the Russians. Russian army defeated Ottomans 1914 December and 1915 January. It is a very important battle on Caucasus, and Russian army started advancing towards Anatolia, which is also called historic Armenia. This is the Armenians' homeland, actually. And Ottomans thought if Russian advances and occupies these territories, which was already considered as a reform area here, this area, then they thought they are going to lose this territory. So exactly the same time, there were another very important military operation. You all maybe know the Gallipoli operation. It was 1915 March. Great powers, Great Britain, France, and of course there was a lot of New Zealanders also along with the British forces. They landed in Gallipoli. And Ottomans thought this is end of the empire. They didn't know what's going to happen couple of hours, and they even emptied Constantinople. They removed the capital city to central Anatolia and surrendered by Russians on Caucasus and by the great powers, Great Britain, France on Gallipoli. They thought this is end of the empire. Then if Russian occupies the entire territory, they will implement the Armenian reform project and we will lose this entire territory, so it's better to remove the entire Armenian population. It is not a coincidence that Armenian genocide started to be implemented March 1915, exactly during these military operations. And how they implemented the entire Armenian genocide, what we call it dual mechanism. They implemented Armenian genocide in the following way. Ottoman government made a general decree to resettle the Armenians. Here is an official map for you. I think you can see this one better. I'm sorry, it's Turkish, but this is an Ottoman official map prepared by Interior Ministry. And according to this map, you see here the yellow part. These are the settlement areas. So 1914 April, Ottoman government made a decision to resettle the Armenians. This is the Turkish denialism today also. If you talk to any Turkish denialists, they would say there was no genocidal decision. It was only a resettlement policy. government wanted only to resettle Armenians, but because of war conditions, they couldn't control everything, and there were some casualties. This is the major denialist argument. So 1915, April, beginning of April, Ottoman authorities started to implement their plans, and according to this plan, from every cities, Armenians were summoned together and were sent to Syria, to today's Aleppo, Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, Mosul. These were the areas where all Armenians sent, deported. And on the way, these convoys were attacked by a special organization which was established for this purpose, and this is how the massacre were also organized. Throughout 1915 summer months, they emptied the entire Anatolia, including the eastern provinces, historic Armenia, and Syria was like a garbage can. They throw the people there, Armenians, without knowing what to do with these people. Ottoman calculation was that Armenians could not arrive the Syrian desert, or not an important amount of them could arrive there. But Armenians survived despite the attacks on the deportations on the way. Overall, 1.3 million Armenians were emptied, deported from their towns and villages. Approximately 18,000 of them arrived Syrian desert. This was the numbers 1915 September. And there is another important characteristic of Armenian genocide. You all maybe believe that there were some fanatics in Istanbul, zealous Muslims, Muslim fanatics, hating Christians, and they wanted to kill Christians, and this was the reason that they organized genocide. You are wrong. There were social engineers, social Darwinists sitting in Istanbul. They developed demographic policies. They implemented Armenian genocide with a mathematic accuracy. They monitored the number almost on weekly basis, and their overall policy was the following: emptying Anatolia and sending this garbage area to Armenian population, to the desert, but Armenians should never exceed 10% of the indigenous Muslim population. How many Muslims were living in that area during that period? It depends which area you include, but around 1.8 to 2.1 million Muslims were living in that area. So this means they would allow only around 150,000, 180,000 Armenians in Syrian deserts. And when they got the records that approximately 800,000 Armenians arrived Syria, they implement the second phase of genocide, which we call it second phase because it started with 1916. During the first phase of genocide, they established concentration camps. You see today Syria along the river of Euphrates, Aleppo, Meskene, Dipsi, Hamam, Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor. This is the Auschwitz of Armenian genocide. These were the concentration camps established beginning of May 1915. And when the numbers were so high, they started emptying these camps beginning 1916 and all the way to Deir ez-Zor. This is the desert, and throughout this process, the remaining Armenian population in Syria were exterminated. only summer 1916, around 250,000-300,000 Armenians were exterminated in Deir ez-Zor. You know how many Armenians survived overall the genocide in that area? Approximately 100,000, 150,000. Approximately 10% of the indigenous population. So there was a mathematical accuracy also. Armenian genocide was a demographic engineering also. So this is the overall 101 basic for the Armenian genocide. And Turkish government, of course, argued all the time over the years, saying that it was a simple deportation. We just sent people from their homes to their new settlement areas, but it was under war condition, and we couldn't control the Kurds, the barbaric Kurds on the mountains, and Arab tribes on the deserts. They attacked, and this was not controlled, planned extermination. This is the official Turkish policy until today. So, now I can start with my own other lecture. So the major argument was, or has been, that there is no central decision to exterminate the Armenians. And they usually had the argument with two words: show us the origins. If you believe that there is a central extermination policy, show us the original of the document, killing orders. You cannot show us any document that clearly shows genocidal intent of Ottoman authorities. In order to implement this policy, can I have a watch so that I can, because I don't want to overgo.
Can I use my phone?
Yeah?
Yeah. You just.
How long should I go? 7:45?
How long should he go?
I mean, it's unendless. I can
You
can tell
could
me.
stop and ask them if, at a certain point if they have questions.
Oh, of course, if you have any question anytime, you can really interrupt. Yes?
Weren't the First World War Germans also helping out for this operation?
Germans were closing
As
their eyes.
observers, at least.
They were closing their eyes. I mean, there were some claims that it was a German plan and so on. No, forget that part. Made in Turkey. Genocide.
Allies with Germany.
Genocide is a Turkish product, and German closed their eyes.
Or rather to the Jewish.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
This is the simplest way.
I have a question. Before you continue, can you please describe the terminology of genocide? Just shed some light on the terminology. What does it mean? Can you define
I tell you an anecdote.
Sure.
It was 1921. One of the architects of Armenian genocide was Turkish Interior Minister Talat Pasha. And after the war, Ottomans lost the war, and Talat Pasha, the Turkish Interior Minister, he became later Prime Minister, he escaped to Germany. And he was hiding in Germany, and an Armenian young boy survived the Armenian genocide, assassinated Talat Pasha in Berlin, 1921, March, I think. And the young man was caught by the German police, and there was a trial. And after the trial, after the trial, the young man was acquitted, actually. A Polish Jewish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, he was at that time a student. He was studying literature. He was capable to talk 14, 15 languages, and he heard about this trial in Berlin. He asked his professor. He said, "I don't understand." Professor asked, "Why? What did you understand?" He said, "There is a man. He killed another man, and they put him in prison. But the guy who were killed, he is responsible to exterminate 1 million people, and he was free. He was walking on the street. I can't understand." The teacher answer was the following: imagine a farmer. He has a lot of chickens. Whether a farmer kills his chickens or not, it's not your business. So the idea was national sovereignty. every nation state can do whatever they want to their citizens. And 1921, Raphael Lemkin, as a student in the literature, said, no, it cannot work. Sovereignty does not mean to exterminate your own people. Sovereignty means to give the healthcare, infrastructure, to work for the wealth of your citizens. So he switched to law, and he developed a law which is known genocide. This means intentionally to exterminate a group of individuals only because they are member of that group. So the term genocide, when Raphael Lemkin coined this term 1944, he had already the Armenians in his mind. So the term,
how do we know that?
he wrote that.
No. But 1944.
Yes, in his book.
Is when the term genocide was
Coined.
made to law. In the law, the general universal thing is that you can't judge anybody for their past doings. You know, the genocide was not invented for.
Yeah.
I think it was the Zionist or the anti-Zionist behavior of German Nazis, the Hitler regime really was then, I think, genocide term was minted. But to make this genocide for Armenians, I think there's so many years.
In his autobiography, Raphael Lemkin writes that he coined these terms because of Armenians. This is his own autobiography, which recently published. You can read there. Your question has a legal aspect. You are asking the legal aspect, whether or not a law can retrospectively implement it. There are different legal opinions about that. We should leave aside for our discussion. You know why? Because we all here believe what happened to Jews was a genocide.
Yes.
There's no question.
No question.
Yeah.
But the law, the genocide law, passed from United Nations 1948. So if you debate about to use this law retrospectively, then you cannot call Holocaust also genocide. Maybe you all know another important information for me. None of the Nazi leaders were tried in Nuremberg from the crime of genocide. It was not existing there. 1948 Genocide Convention had a preamble. If you open and look this preamble, you will see in that preamble it says, this is also part of the law, genocide occurred throughout human history. And Raphael Lemkin also wrote a history of genocide, and he starts his history of genocide with the ancient Greek and the medieval period and so on, and colonialism and so on. So whether or not a law retrospectively applicable to a certain cases, it is a legal debate among legal scholars. That Raphael Lemkin or the international community called Armenian case after the term was coined as genocide, there was no doubt about it. You know, imagine cancer as a human disease. We call it as cancer maybe on the time A, but this does not mean that all the illnesses before that cannot be called cancer. So this is the major rule that we have to keep in mind. Back to our topic, the Armenian genocide. Turkish government mainly developed three strategies to cover up their genocidal policies. One, I will give you one example. One, they create and assemble their own facts and archive. Or maybe let me go back because it's important. I use the model of an American anthropologist Michel Roth-Trullo. He passed away a couple of years ago. His main argument, how you silence history, how you develop a denialist historiography. For every nation state almost, he says that there are 4 moments how you create silence about this. This is a topic for New Zealand, also for Australia and so on. Number 1, the moment of fact creation. You make your own sources. Number 2, the moment of fact assembly. You collect all these materials and you create your own archive. And number 3, the moment of fact retrieval, the making of narrative. Based on your archival material, you started to narrate the story. This is how it had happened. And then number 4, the moment of retrospective significance. So this is our history. You make this narration as a national historiography. So this is how you create silence. In that sense, this was the Ottoman government's strategy also. And I add the 5th to that list. This is the moment of destroying and or proving the falsity of critical documents. So this is how Ottoman government functioned or organized, or Turkish government also. Number 1, they create and assemble their own facts and archive. I will give you one example so that you can understand. So the Armenian genocide denial didn't start after events happened. It started during actual genocidal process itself. Number 2, they destroy the evidence in their hands that they could control that clearly shows genocidal intent of the Ottoman authorities. What are these materials? Another short historical information. After the First World War was over, the Committee of Union and Progress, the party that organized the Armenian genocide, they lost the power, and a new government came to power in Istanbul late 1918. This government opened a criminal investigation against the previous party, Committee of Union and Progress party that organized the Armenian genocide. And there were trials in Istanbul, 1919, 1921. There were approximately 63 trials, and they tried around 200 defendants. They gave 16 death penalties, and they hanged 3 of them. So during these trials, there were a lot of evidences that clearly show genocidal intent of Ottoman authorities, killing orders that I published in my book, or eyewitness accounts, testimonies of the high-rank Ottoman militaries, high-rank Ottoman bureaucrats. They were all, or the telegrams that openly says, exterminate the Armenians. These materials that came to the light during the tribunals, scum. We don't know where about these materials. They are all destroyed, or they are today somewhere in Ankara in the military archive. We don't know where about these materials. We know some of them, the existence of them, because Ottoman government published the verdicts and indictments of these tribunals in Istanbul. They are all public record today. You can read these trials and indictments. Yes?
Okay, as far as I know, I'm not a historian, but as far as I know, during those years, 1919 and 1921, there was no official Turkish government. It was under the siege by the great powers that you mentioned.
There were even 2 Turkish governments during that period.
So,
one is the Ottoman government.
Yeah.
Ottoman government in Istanbul. It functioned until 1922 November.
Under the supervision of the great powers.
Not so much. This is the important part. There were Great Britain, France, and Greek forces in Istanbul under control, but government was functioning. There were regular government in Istanbul. And during that period, there were a second government, Ankara government. This is what became later today's Turkey. 1919, 1921, when these trials were happening in Istanbul, it was a common effort of Ankara government and Istanbul. So the Turkish nationalists, including Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of Turkish Republic today, he was supportive for these tribunals.
I'm sorry, but you are completely wrong. The Turkish government was not established. And Ottoman Empire and Turkey are totally two different entities. For your convenience, you're mixing both of them. Another thing, to that question, no, excuse me, but hey, this is serious. In 1921, Istanbul, the capital of Ottoman Empire, was occupied. The occupiers were France and Britain. They apprehended 144 Ottoman officials, including the Prime Minister. They sent them to Malta upon the request of Armenians, and they questioned them for so many years, excuse me, and at the end, British prosecutors could not find any evidence against them.
Thank you so much.
Basically, what I'm saying, excuse me, but I think you avoid facts. You're telling us about, good stories, and I really enjoy that. But sorry, this is a historical lecture, and we'd like to stick to history rather than gossip.
Are you done?
Thank you.
Thank you.
But what do you say about it? What do you say?
Very simple.
What?
Read my book. No, I'm not kidding.
Excuse me just a second. Hold on. Let me just stop. Let him finish his talk, and then you can raise some questions.
Leave that question for the end. Yes.
So the issue is following. This is my PhD topic.
Excuse me, I'd just like to say, could we not have statements, please? Could we just have questions, not statements from the audience?
I'll have questions at the end, please.
Yeah,
It's better.
We are interested to hear Mr.
let's-
Trump and not other people.
Yes, thank you.
Finish this aspect. This is my PhD topic, the tribunals in Istanbul, and I know in and out all of these issues. These tribunals in Istanbul was a common effort of Mustafa Kemal, the nationalist in Ankara, and the Istanbul government. The reason was the Paris Peace Conference. They were trying the perpetrator of Armenian genocide not because they were humanists. Great Britain and France made it very clear to Ottomans, saying that if you want to get better result from Paris Peace Conference, it is better you do something for these perpetrators. The Turkish calculation was, the Istanbul government's and the Ankara government's calculation was, if we hang a couple of perpetrators, low-level bureaucrats, and really these three individuals that they hang, they were so low-level bureaucrats. None of the high-ranking officials were sentenced in these tribunals. Only those who were in absentia, they were sentenced to death penalty. And they thought, the Ottoman and Turkish Ottoman government in Istanbul and the nationalists in Ankara, they thought when they have these tribunals, they will get better result from Paris Peace Conference. What was the Paris better result? Better result was today's Turkey. They wanted their sovereign territory be safe, and Great Britain and France recognized the remaining Ottoman territories as a new independent state, which they didn't do. They decided to carve up Anatolia between different ethnic groups. Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, and this was not acceptable for Turks, and this is why they organized their national liberation war and so on and so forth. So the short story is, during these tribunals, there were a lot of materials come to the light. The investigation committee traveled throughout Anatolia, For example, in the central capital city, Ankara, what's our capital city, it was a province at that time also. Only from Ankara province, they collected around 40 incriminating telegrams, saying that massacre killing orders related to Armenians. So these materials were all in Istanbul by the court, and today they are gone. We don't know whereabouts of this material. As I mentioned to you, we know the existence of this material because of this. This is, I mentioned to you, Ottoman government published during these trials indictment and verdicts of these tribunals. This is one of these official gazette of Ottoman government, and this is the main indictment, read in the first session, April 28, and published in the newspaper May 5th, 1919. So, as I underlined here, there are quotations from certain telegrams, okay, in that indictment. One of them, for example, from a guy named Bahattin Shakir. He was like the Himmler of Holocaust. He was the leader of special organization in charge of exterminating Armenians. And he was sitting in Erzurum, one of the cities in Eastern Anatolia, and sending ciphers telegram to the provinces. And one of these telegrams, he says, are the Armenians being dispatched from there, being liquidated? Are these troublesome people you say you have expelled and dispersed being exterminated or just deported? Answer explicitly. This is a telegram and published in the main indictment because it's an incriminatory evidence against the defendants of the trials. And in second telegram, for example, it's another famous telegram from the Turk army commander. He says, whoever saves an Armenian, any Muslim who saves an Armenian will be hanged in front of his house and his house will be burned down. This is an order from Turk army commander to all provinces. So we know existence of these materials, but the question is, where is the original? So the Turkish denialist argument was, over the years, show us the original. As long as you cannot show us the original, how should we believe in public prosecutor? How shouldn't we know that he made up something? As long as you cannot show us the original, so we cannot act, these are not credible evidence for a genocidal intent. We cannot use this. So this was one example of destroying the evidences that shows the genocidal intent. Of course, Ottoman government could only destroy those materials that they have in their hands. But what about if there are some other documents came to light somehow and it is out of control of Ottoman government or Turkish government? This is the other example, what we call it Naim Efendi's memoir. So this is actually what my book about, okay? Second operation that they did, they disputed the authenticity of some materials that were available. What were these materials? Here is the story. Aram Andonian, you see the picture of this man, was an Armenian intellectual. He was arrested April 24, 1915 in Istanbul. As you may heard, Armenian genocide officially starts for us symbolic day, April 24, 1915. On that very day, Ottoman government arrested approximately 200 Armenian intellectuals. Aram Andonian was one of them. And they were sent to two different provinces in central Ankara today, around Ayash and Çankırı. These are names that doesn't say you anything much, but they were sent from Istanbul to two different provinces around today's capital city of Turkey, Ankara, and they were taken in groups throughout 1915 summer, and they were exterminated. Armenian intellectuals. Aram Andonian was one of them, and he was taken with a group of intellectuals to be killed. Miraculously, he survived. Because he fell from the car, he broke his leg, and it was then they had to bring him to hospital and so on. This is how he survived and ended up in Aleppo. In Aleppo, 1918, Aram Andonian met an Ottoman bureaucrat. Actually, he met him in 1916, but in order to make long story shorter, 1918 November, when Turkish army forces withdrew from Aleppo, this guy, Aram Andonian, met an old friend, a Turkish bureaucrat, with the name Naim Efendi. Naim Efendi was a gambler, he was alcoholic, and he loved to be bribed. And Aram Andonian bribed him and took from him several Ottoman documents. This is what we call it Naim Efendi's memoir. Efendi is the term, sir, or Mr. Naim's memoir. Actually, this memoir consists of two different parts. One is handwritten copies of some original Ottoman documents, because this Naim Efendi was working in the deportation office. He had access to these materials. Handwrittenly, he copied all these material, and in between these handwritten copies, he also wrote something what he was remembering about events or the telegrams. And Aram Andonian published this memoir in 1921. And this memoir was one part what Naim Efendi sold to Andonian. Once Naim, the Turkish bureaucrat, wanted more money, Aram Andonian told him, no, I'm not going to give you any money if you bring me some handwritten copies of documents, bring me the originals. If you bring me originals, I'll give you some more money. And Aram Andonian wrote, Naim, Turkish bureaucrat, wrote around 26 documents. So, we have a memoir, handwritten, includes 52 Ottoman documents, plus 26 original materials. So these were out of control of Ottoman authorities. Aram Andonian published these materials 1921 as a book. And this is what we call it Metziyegern, Arman, Great Crime, the Armenian language. It was published, then published in English and in French language also, this book. And this book contained direct killing orders. I'll give you here one example. So this is the image of this document. This is a cipher document. Of course, killing order cannot be sent with open letters. It was coded, and as you see here, this is a 3-digit Ottoman coding system, Arabic. Every 3-digit equal for one Arabic letter. For example, this is S and 852, for example, it's for this letter. So this is how they coded the telegram, and the telegram is one of those killing orders. And it says in the telegram, it had previously been communicated that the government, by order of the Cemiyet, had decided, the Committee of Union and Progress that organized the Armenian Genocide, had decided to completely annihilate all Armenians living in Turkey. Those who oppose this command and decision cannot remain part of the official structure of the state without paying attention to women, child, and incompetent, no matter how tragic the methods of annihilation might be, without listening to feeling of conscience, their existence must be ended. This memoir contains around 8 direct killings. And what was the defense of Turkish government until publication of my book? They said, these are all Armenian fabrications. Armenian made up all these materials. And their major argument, they had three major arguments. Let me go these three major arguments and I'll come back to that issue. Turkish authorities published a book 1983. This book is available online. You can download in Turkish and English language regarding Aram Andonion's publication 1921. So, 1921, we have a book that contains direct killings order of Armenians. 1983, Turkish Historical Society published a book with the title Talat Pasha's Telegram, and they made three important arguments in that book, 1983. They said an Ottoman bureaucrat by the name Naim Efendi did not exist. Andonion, the Armenian guy, he made one. We went through the entire archive, they argued. We couldn't find any single Ottoman official with the name Naim Efendi. So, second important claim, a non-existent man cannot write a memoir. And, of course, there is a strong argument also, say that if you have this document, memoir, show us. Indeed, until the publication of my book, we didn't know the existence of this memoir. So, in my book, you will see the original Ottoman version of this memoir and the transliteration also. So, the second, there is no memoir. And the third important argument was all these telegrams, for example, that you see here, these cipher telegrams that Andonion published in his book. These are, as you see, two coded Arabic cipher telegram, three coded, three-digit number, two-digit numbers coded telegrams. And the third argument was these are all perjuries made up by Armenians. It has nothing to do with Ottoman coding system during the First World War. And because these three arguments were so strong, and we couldn't have access to Ottoman archive in 1980s, 1990s, the scholarly world mainly accepted Turkish Historical Society's book as a credible source. We couldn't show that there is a man in Naim Bey. We couldn't find any memoir, and we couldn't really prove the authenticity of these documents. So this is the reason that Turkish government, until recently, had a very strong argument when they made the case, show us the original, any direct killing order, it was lucky. Either they hide them, or they claim the authenticity. They say that they are not authentic, they are made up by Armenians. So my book is all about these Turkish arguments, Turkish government's arguments. What I did in my book, I showed them the origins.
I'm sorry, but I don't agree with you.
So this is, you remember, let me give you one example. I understand. Let me finish, then you will ask the question. Definitely you will have the right to ask questions. It's your legitimate right to ask questions. I mentioned you that these two telegrams, okay, you remember this. This is from the main indictment. Bahattin Shakir was asking whether or not Armenians were exterminated, and the other, every Muslim who saves an Armenian will be hanged in front of his house. Turkish argument was show us the original. If you cannot show the original, we cannot believe that there is such a telegram. Here is the original. This is what I published in my book. This is the original of this telegram, and this telegram had two important characteristics. As you see here, this is the Ottoman government's official letterhead. And as you see here also, the telegram is 4-digit coding system, written based on a 4-digit coding system. And on top of each 4-digit coding system, it is the written how decoded. So any word is decoded in that way. So the telegrams openly says that whether or not Armenians in that area being exterminated or not. He wanted to get the information. And this is the same telegram. And here some cipher numbers for you. The word send off or deport or Turkish sevk was coded with 4889. The word serve, bey, was coded with 2469. The word only was coded with 4632, and so on. And the plural endings had a special coding system, and the first personal suffix had another coding system. What I did after I discovered these documents, I can tell you the story where I discovered and how ended up. It's in a private archive I found it, and there is a story, you can make a movie about that issue. But here is what I did. You see these numbers and this coding system. I worked in Ottoman archive approximately 6 months. As you see here, each numbers equal for a word or for an ending, and I looked materials in the Ottoman archive today, whether there were relevant documents in the archive. One parenthesis about this coding system. Ottoman government changed the coding system every year. So let's say the code Armenian 8519, this was used only in 1950. In 1916, they used a different number. 5198, for example. They switched the numbers. So, in order to look the authenticity of these documents, the letterhead was not enough for me. And the telegram was from July 1915. I went through the Ottoman archival materials, July 1915, this is what I discovered. As you see, this is here, what you see, this is an Ottoman document, today still in Ottoman archive. If you go to Istanbul, to the archive, you can get this document. And as you see in these documents, 8519 Armenian. And it is exactly the same as you have in this telegram. And I went through all these documents and I discovered that the telegrams in Istanbul were coded exactly the same coding system as these killing over here. So this is the discovery. So Turkish government cannot deny the authenticity of this document. To satisfy your curiosity, sir, they accepted that this is an authentic document. And there is no doubt anymore on the authenticity of this killing. This is what I did in this. Because the letterhead is authentic and the coding system exactly the same. And one additional information, these documents, the Ottoman documents, were only available for us until 2012. Ottoman Turkish government started putting this kind of telegrams in the archive after 2012. So any scholarly work before 2012 could not have achieved the same result. So we are thankful to Turkish authorities that they put these materials on the archive. So I went through each and every document and showed that this is an original document. And I am jumping now because I did it for every word almost. And In my book, I put some images also, but you can see more images here. Again, these are original documents in the Ottoman archive, and this is the telegram that I'm talking about. Exact the same coding system. So you can't really discuss the authenticity of this document anymore. And I did, as I said, for each and every word, I'm jumping all this, and this is the other original document that they were asking us to show the original. You remember, it is considered necessary that those who have been hiding and maintaining Armenians in opposition to government orders be hanged in front of their properties and their properties burned to the ground. And they were asking us the originals. And here is the original of this document. It is also with Ottoman letterhead and again in this private archive. So one important issue was solved regarding the materials that they hide. So what about the Aram Andonian documents or these Naim Efendi materials that they claim, Turkish authorities claim that they were all fake, produced by Armenians? You remember there were three important claims. Number one, there is no Naim Bey. Number two, there is no memoir. Number three, telegrams are all fake. What I discovered, or what my research, as a result of my research, I discovered that there is an Ottoman bureaucrat with the name Naim Bey, and I have the full memoir. And about the telegram I might talk later, but let me show the original Ottoman documents related to Naim Efendi. I mentioned you that Aram Andonian actually met Naim Efendi in an earlier date, not 1918. It was 1916. This is what you see here as red point is a concentration camp, Meskene. Aram Andonian ended 1916, probably, we don't know the exact date, probably January or early February in this concentration camp. And Naim Efendi was sent from Aleppo to coordinate the deportation in Meskene, and Naim also was in Meskene. Both met in Meskene 1916, February, March months. And we know from Aram Andonian's memoir and from all other Armenian memoirs also that there were high corruption in that concentration camp. The Ottoman officials, military personnel, and the bureaucrats, they were taking bribes from Armenians and they were giving them passing identity cards. And so the Armenians could escape from Meskene all the way back Aleppo. This is how Aram Andonian also escaped to Aleppo from Meskene, because all Armenians were sent from Meskene to Derzor to be exterminated. I discovered in the archive when I worked that indeed the corruption was so high. The governor of Aleppo, who was in charge of the entire region, wrote a telegram to Istanbul saying that we cannot deport Armenians anymore. They were escaping, they are coming back, and we cannot implement our plan, we have to do something. I'm stopping sending Armenians from Aleppo or other camps to other areas unless you solve this problem. Ottoman government sent a delegation, a commission, and this commission made inquiries, investigations. And who was one of, and Turkish military archive published this as a book. So the entire investigation related to corruption and bribery in this specific camp, Meskene, was published by Turkish military archive as a book 2007. And this is the 7th volume of 8 volumes. Turkish military archive published all together 8 volumes. And each around 800 pages. Nobody reads them, except some idiots like myself. And this volume 7 was related to these Meskene investigations. And who is there? This is our Naim Efendi. This is his testimony. So it was not, the honor does not go to me. It's the Turkish Military Archive. They published existence of an Ottoman bureaucrat in their own art, from their own art. And I discovered some other materials also in the archive about, this is the signature of Naim Efendi, and we know that now he is the former dispatch officer at Meskene, currently employed somewhere else. He is 26-year-old and from Silifke, a town, and married, and so on and so forth. We have extensive information about this guy, and it's exactly the same information what Armenian Aramandonio gave about this. So this was one discovery, and I found some other original Ottoman documents also that shows the existence of this individual. I'm jumping all this. Oh, here is the memoir. This is the handwritten memoir of Naim Efendi. Turkish government or the Turkish Historical Society was asking, show us the memoir. Here is the memoir. And what time is it? Oh, it's there. I'll stop at 8. So
There's water.
no, because it never ends. I can talk hours and hours. This is the memoir, and I discovered this memoir in a private archive. Let me tell the story very short. Aramandonian is Armenian individual, intellectual. After he had these materials, he became a member of Armenian delegation in Paris Peace Conference. He came from Aleppo to Paris, and he became the director of a library in Paris, which still today open, Bogos Nubar Library. And he put all these materials in Bogos Nubar Library. He was the director of the library until he passed away in 1952. But Naim's memoir and all other telegrams are gone. We don't know where the originals are, where these materials. We don't know. It happened. God. You have to believe sometimes. An Armenian priest with the name Krikor Gergerian, after he became an ordained priest, decided to work on Armenian genocide. And he traveled throughout the world and filmed and copied whatever he could find. He came to Paris, 1951, around, and he filmed all these materials. And these materials were in the private archive of this guy, Krikor Gergerian's private archive, and is today in New York. And soon you will have all these materials available online. We are putting everything on online with English translation also, so that everybody can access these materials. So I discovered this memoir, and of course, so the second problem is also solved. But there was a third issue that bothers me a lot. Andonian was also talking about this Naim, saying that he was a gambler, loved alcohol, and he loved to be bribed. So imagine 1918, you are an Ottoman bureaucrat, and you know that the Armenians were desperate looking for documents. Then the question, as a normal scholarly question also for you, is, couldn't he made up all these materials, all these stories? Because he knew that the Armenians need some materials, so I know, because I worked in the deportation office, I can write down something and made up something and get some money. So I worked in Ottoman archive around 6 months, and I really discovered some important issues. But before telling you what these discoveries that I did, maybe a story, another one. This memoir is 36 handwritten pages. And you remember also Armenian published this as a book 1921. I compare. They are not equal. They are not the same. There are some passages that I have here in my possession. Armenian did not publish that passages. Makes sense. He thought, it's not important. Why should I publish it? But there are some passages in Armenian's publication in the book, we don't have this in our memoir. And we solved this problem also, again in that archive that I found, a private letter written by Armenian. He tells us the story why some pages are missing. He said that I sent them to Istanbul for a tribunal. They asked me from the evidence, then I sent some pages to Istanbul. This is the reason that it was missing. So maybe the last point, then I can take some questions. So I have to look the authenticity of the issues that he was talking. You remember, Naim was not only copying the documents, he was also writing something in between the telegrams, what he could remember. Here is a story for him. He says, after a telegram, he says, I remember, he says, without giving us any documentary evidence, whatever from his recollection, whatever he could remember. I remember, he says, Talat, the interior minister, sent a telegram, and he said, Armenians with the name Dishchekenyan, Hazarabedyan, Leon Amiralyan, and Toros Çağlasyan should not be deported from Aleppo, they should be kept in Aleppo. And Naim continues, this is, by the way, his memoir. This is from his memoir. And he says, despite this clear order from Istanbul, governor sent these Armenians and they perished on their way to Derzo. So they were killed. In the archive, I discovered this telegram of the interior minister that Naim was talking about. So he doesn't show us any original document, only from his recollection, with the name of this Armenian, Dishchekenyan, Hazarabedyan, and here in the Ottoman archive, Dishchekenyan, Hazarabedyan, Çağlasyan, as you see. Indeed, he was telling us the truth. And I went through several other issues. I really discovered that the man was telling the truth. But one information for you, this part from Naim's memoir, it was not published by Armenian. It is an unpublished part. My guess is, if he had published, I would not have found this material in Ottoman archive. They would have removed from the archive. So, throughout this research, I discovered other similarities. All is in my book to show clearly that this man was telling us the truth. And regarding the telegrams, I also discovered this coding system was also authentic, but I don't want to go so far. Let me stop here and I can take some questions. Thank you very much.